All right, YouTube. Jason Stone here with another interview, and I'm pumped. Again, it seems like the more interviews we have, the more ways that we're exploring how to use logos. And this is a brand new one for me, bilingual user, and so I'm a little nervous because I'm not fresh on my Spanish, but I feel like Eddie will guide me through this. It's going to be just okay. I'm going to be fine. I've got with me Eddy Gil, and we're going to sit down and explore how he uses the application for bilingual sermon prep. And we're also going to dive into clippings. So, Eddie, if I missed anything at the get go, let me know about where we're headed today. But before we get into it, can you share a bit about who you are, what you're up to here in the United States and in the DR with your ministry work?
Absolutely. So thank you, Jason, for having me. Excited to be here and share how I use logos. So I'm from the Dominican Republic, born and raised. Spanish is my first language, and later in life, I had to learn English, which I'm very thankful right now. And since for the past 4 years, me and my family, we've been living in North Carolina, primary for seminary studies. Now I'm working full time with a church here in Raleigh area, and I love it. But part of my ministry also has to do a lot with serving the Hispanic community. So that's why when it comes to logos, I've been using logos since I started my seminary studies. When I use logos, I mostly do research in English and a lot of preparation. But then at the end of the day, I deliver in Spanish for Hispanic audience. So
That's
I,
wild.
I
I don't know
hope
how
that
you
is.
do it.
Hey, there's people that know Greek, and I didn't do very good in Greek, so.
That's true. Okay. What was your seminary study in? What'd you do? Or where'd you go to
So
school? Or what'd you do there?
yeah, I'm still studying at Southeastern Baptist
Okay.
Theological Seminary, and I'm pursuing my MDiv. So
That's
I
awesome.
hope to be done anytime soon, but I've been saying that for the past 3 years, so I'll keep saying until I graduate.
What's your favorite course so far? Just curious.
Probably has to be sermon,
Yeah.
expository preaching, one and two. I also really enjoy, church history, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So that was also very fun. And anything related with leadership, I enjoy that too.
That's so cool. All right. So today on the docket, we've got, like I said, clippings, sermon prep, which will be some of the sermon builder.
Hmm.
And then you also have an application that you'd like to talk a little bit about that you use with your Mac. Anything else that we want to cover today?
That's pretty much it.
Awesome. Awesome. You ready to share your screen and be put in the hot seat here?
Let's do it.
Let's try it. Let's see if it happens. If that screen
All
share
right.
works. Yeah, it looks good.
There you go. So I'm just gonna start diving right into it. I'm gonna try to be slow and clear so you can all understand my accent. But if not, pray for the Holy Spirit to give you the gift of interpretation.
Amen.
So like I say, Spanish is my first language, but as you can see from my logos, it's in English. And I want to say from the offset, the reason why I want to advocate for having logos in English, not advocate, but my preference for having English logos is because the amount of resources in logos are much, much, abundant in English and in Spanish. Now, I'm thankful because every month we see more resources adding to the Spanish libraries, which is very helpful, and I'm thankful for that. With that being said, if you don't have like a large library as much as you do in English, then that's going to affect, for instance, like everything I do with fact books or smart search. Specifically now the Logos has AI. It pulls information from my library. So if I have or any, library and resources, but because you have more resources than English, your AI feature is going to be more powerful and your fact book is going to be more powerful. So that's why primarily
Hmm.
my research and everything I do is
Yeah.
first in English. So
Yeah. So you're
let me walk you
still
a little
adding
bit. Hmm.
resources are you still adding resources that are English and Spanish to your library?
Yes,
And you just you lean more towards the English because of the number of resources that are available in the store. Is that what you're saying?
correct. So
Okay.
I lean more in English. If I get a chance to get one in Spanish, I do it or I consider it. But my first go-to is always going to be the English
Okay.
library and the English resources for that matter.
Yeah. Great.
Mhm.
Cool. Let's get
All
into
right.
it.
So let me walk you a little bit of clipping. So this is part of my sermon prep. Every time I need to teach or preach a passage, the first thing that I do is obviously I take out the passage and I pray about it, and I just write notes on on a piece of paper, or sometimes in the notes app. But that's not what we're going to talk about. But then the second thing is when I'm using logos, I'm doing research. So right now, let's see if I can pull out one passage. So we're going to take Matthew 25, verse 31st and on, which is where Jesus talks about, when I was naked, you clothed me, when I was hungry, you fed me, and everything. And I have that already in the passage, guys. Let's see. Every time, one of the things that I like about the clipping notes is that it's organized. So
Hmm.
I have one clipping for each sermon that I preach. So in this case, I just created one that was a standard. And let's say that I open one of my resources, which is the New International, what is it called? Well, I don't know.
NIV application commentary.
NIV application. It's one of my favorites, even though I don't know the name, but I know it's always first on my list.
Yeah, totally. It's
Um,
so good.
yes, it's a great investment. So let's see that I'm reading through this. Now, I'm just going to pick any paragraph whatsoever. And I like this one in particularly. And there's something about it that really caught my attention that I want to make sure that I save it for later as I'm doing, writing down my sermon and just putting my thoughts together. So I come here to my clipping, and there's a couple of ways that I can do it. I can either just right click where it says selection and find my clipping, which is going to
But it
be
looks like you had
right here.
shared. Looks like you shared your application and not your entire
Oh, did
screen.
I?
So yeah,
Hmm.
so you just go ahead and
Okay.
select that paragraph, and then we can
hmm
dive into it. So what do you do with it after you select that paragraph?
So I right click and then
Yeah.
I select, add clipping right here. Usually it tells you your most recent ones. So you can see this is the one that I created last. So it's going to show over here and then it's going to add. But, one of the ways that I prefer to use it is just, select and drag and
I
drop,
didn't know that you could
which
do
is
that. Just select and drag it over.
Oh,
Okay.
it's so smooth and so pleasing,
Yeah. Okay.
and convenient. So that's one of the ways. Now here's the powerful thing for me as to like why I prefer to use clipping, than notes, and that is a couple things. Number one, the tags right here. So as I'm doing research, sometimes you find that there's a lot of things that are happening and you just like highlight a lot of things. But in my case, I like to put a tag as to like why that's interesting for me.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
here, like I would say, this passage kind of gives me like an overview or, or something that I'm wanting to see. Or maybe it talks about an illustration that I would like
Yeah.
to keep in mind later as I'm doing my work. So there's like several tags that I have on my own, like exegesis, commentary, context, illustration, applications, gospel. Like that's something that I want to highlight because that's how I can connect the gospel with my sermon or teaching, theme words, or even something as a cross reference. So you start like building everything, you start to tag. Logos, one of the things that I like is every time you do like a clipping, it also tags the passage that is relating to right here. So
Okay.
you also
Yeah.
have, sometimes it gives you like a paragraph, sometimes it gives you verse by verse, depends on the commentary and your resource. So that's one of the things that I do. Now, why is that helpful? Because when you have a clipping with, let's say, like, 80 resources or 70 clippings, as sometimes that happens, it can be very hard to find what you're looking for. Like, I remember that I read something about it, but I cannot find it.
Hmm.
Maybe it happens just to me, but in these cases, what I do is just, Command F. I'm a Mac user. You might be, Control F if you are Windows, I believe, and you see the search bar popping right here. And then I
Yeah.
can just look for what I'm looking for. Like, let's say I want to just a quick overview of the passage, and I type over, and I see it
Yeah.
right here because it's already tagged. Or I want to talk about, hey, give me like specific, like, let's say if I was looking information on verse 30, 31, then it will show my tags. Same happen with the gospel, illustration, applications, whatever tags you use. It's gonna make it a lot easier for me to tag it, and also to find that information. The other thing that I like about clipping as a bilingual user is like sometimes when I'm reading things, I come across like thoughts and I read something and I'm like, "Ooh, that's good, but I need to contextualize it. Like I need to make it applicable for my Hispanic audience."
Yeah.
So I might think of something in the moment, but then because I'm doing research, I will move on. And then later, as I'm doing my sermon, I'm like, man, why did I include this right here? Because it doesn't connect to my audience. So what I do is I use the note feature right here. And as soon as I type something, let's say, this, I'll just write something in Spanish.
Sure.
Esto nos recuerda el amor de Jesús, which is this reminds us of the love of Jesus. Like I can just write like personalized notes on my end that when I see it, it will help me. Okay, this is what I was thinking when I clicked this comment, or this is the idea that I was pursuing when I chose to include that on my sermon prep. And that
Can I
just,
ask real quick?
immense value. Yes, absolutely.
Are the notes also searchable in the same way that you searched, like with the Control F? So
Yes, I believe they are. So if I go and type amor, it's
yeah.
right here.
Well,
It will
that's
pull
really
out too.
really handy. That's nice.
Yes. And you can edit. I mean, it's not gonna like right here on the top, you can see like all the formatting tools, so you can give it some. Sometimes what I like to do too, even the clipping is editable, which means like I can just highlight a specific, let's say like line or like a phrase that really stood out, and I can just edit it. So when I'm reading it back, I'm like, okay, this is another thing that really caught my attention.
So awesome.
Um,
Yeah, that's great.
mhm. Now, so that's very self-explanatory. Here's another thing that very comes handy when it comes to, in my case, preaching in Spanish, and that is, let's say that I found a quote, and I want to use that quote as it is because it was so good. You cannot improve it. But the thing is, it's in English. If you try to go right here, right click, the only options that you see are cut, copy, and paste. But if you, one of the things that I like about clipping is not only are you taking information, but you can quickly go to the source of information. So in this case, I'm just going to close out my book. Let's say that I'm like, oh, this was very good quote. Where did I found it? And then what I can do is just click right here. It's going to open my book right
Mm-hmm.
away. I see the paragraph that I was interested in when I highlight it. Look what is here. It's a translation feature. So I click it, and it translates automatically to Spanish. So from here, I can just copy and take it to my sermon, or I can just, put it on my notes if I want to have
Mm-hmm.
it ready for the next time. So it's just, very convenient, as you're doing a lot of research and as you're preparing for sermon prep, um, to have that ability to do that in Logos.
Yeah. Can I ask a question about that as well? The um
Absolutely.
the translate feature that you just used is actually
hmm
an AI feature, if I'm not mistaken. Have you
hmm
had any issues with the limitation with AI?
I have not so far.
No.
So,
Have you run out
um,
of
I
credits or any of that? No.
not so far because you're not going to be translating every single resource that I use.
Yeah.
Only the ones that will make it to my sermon manuscript, or only the ones that I want to have as close to the original quote as in Spanish or in English. So
Mm-hmm.
those are the ones that I will try to translate. If I have a thought of, like if let's say like this clipping just leads me to a more general idea, I would just write in Spanish and I don't need to translate that. So
Yeah.
so
Okay,
far
cool.
I have
I
not
know.
run into that issue.
Yeah, I was just wondering. I know that the blue circle on the side and the
hmm
limitation. Some people had concerns about that, but I don't think for the most part there's been a lot of people who hit that all that often. So just wondering. Cool. Anything else on clippings before we jump to some broader sermon manager or sermon builder?
So I just want to show you a little bit of how it looks once you have it fleshed out. So this is one of my clippings from a sermon that I preached before. As you can see, I have some notes over here. I got context. I like this tag over here that says important or importante,
Hmm.
because these are the ones that I really, really don't want to miss. So I would every once in a while when I hear like a alley or like a like a dead end on my sermon manuscript, I try to find what are some of the important clippings that I have. And then you can see here like I have my comments in Spanish and everything. But this is for a sermon, and you can see the amount of clippings that I have from various resources
Yeah.
that I was reading in preparation. So having that opportunity really, really helped me out in doing so. So
Hmm.
that's a little bit of clipping, and then we can talk about sermon prep in the Logos app now if you would
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. I just as you get ready um, for sermon builder and sermon prep,
Hmm.
I like the idea of clippings because they're kind of like note cards that you can, like, if an idea comes to your head, even if it's not from a
Hmm.
book, you can
Hmm.
jot it down on your note card and tag it and then say, that's an
Yes.
illustration that happened while I was at the grocery store or something. And
Hmm.
like, I'm just going to make a quick note and then I'm going to come back to it later. Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
And here's the other thing too, Jason, is I found myself sometimes like I read things as I'm like, uh, like studying, getting ready. Like I might read something and at the moment I was like, oh, that's good, but I'm not gonna use it. And then when I'm doing the sermon prep, I was like, you know what? I think I will use that. Where did I see it? And I
mm-hmm.
cannot find it. So, it's basically like taking pictures. Like my wife hates that I take a lot of pictures when we go on vacation, like a lot of pictures. But then she's the one who ended up using my picture to upload to her social media because
Yeah.
I took so many that eventually
Yeah.
you will find something that is usable, that is worth a
Yeah.
while. So,
You're
so
right.
that's how I approach it.
All right. Cool. Good stuff.
Hmm. Now, talking about sermon, prep and using the sermon builder um, feature in Logos. I've before I use like Google Docs, and I've used Apple's Note app, or I don't know how it's called. The Pages is the one, the Words one.
But yeah.
Um, and lately, to be honest, a few years ago, I decided to transition fully to Logos for my sermon, like manuscripts and writing. And I've not regret that decision, and I'm gonna say a few reasons why I find that very useful. Number one, because it is searchable within Logos. Like every time I'm studying,
Mm-hmm.
all my notes, everything that I do is researchable. So let's say, for example, that if I was looking again at the passage um, on Matthew 25. Now, these are all my resources, but here on the top, you see your content, and you will find my clippings. These are clippings that I was doing before. Maybe I have clippings that it did for another sermon that I have it in here, but also my sermons are going to be found here. So maybe I preach on another passage, but I made a comment about that passage in particular, or I use it as a cross reference. It is already built into my Logos library or my database, so it's a lot easier to make it searchable. The other benefit, to be honest, you have an app that was designed for that purpose. You have an app that was designed for sermon prep, so that I find it to be very, very helpful. So let me talk a little bit about how I do sermon prep. Now, again, in the past, I've used Apple Pages and Microsoft Word, and they're good. But a few years ago, I decided to move entirely to Logos for a couple reasons. Number one, all my sermons, they become part of my Logos database in a sense. So in the future, like let's say that I want to pull out some, passage guide study about Matthew 25, 23. It's going to show me all my commentaries and resources in Logos, but it will also show my sermons as a resource. And not only the ones that are preaching on that passage, but imagine if I had another sermon that made a comment or an allusion or a cross-reference to the passage that I'm preaching now. It will show here on my passage guide, and it just becomes another tool that I can use as I'm doing sermon prep. The other thing too is just it's a part of Logos that is designed for sermon prep. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
not gonna go into detail about like scripture detection, which is like when you are writing a sermon, if you, I'm just gonna put it right here, like if I write John 3:16. Logos automatically see that and then highlights it where I can just like come over here and insert that passage into my sermon, which saves me a lot of time. Like it
Mm-hmm.
really does. Not only saves me time typing, but if I want to do multi-purpose like translations, I can go into all my different translations and select the one that is more that I want to use for that specific cross-reference. And again, as a bilingual user, sometimes I have to preach in Spanish as I do most of my time, but sometimes I preach in English. So it also helps me to pull out like a sermon that I preach in Spanish and now I need
Yeah.
to update it to preach it in English. I can just change the version on my on the references here. So that
Mm-hmm.
is one thing that is very helpful. The other thing, now, Jason, you might correct me. I'm not sure how this section is called, but this I find is so, so helpful as I do lay out my sermon, and I'm going to show you why. These are, the first options are basically headings, like heading 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the lower they go, the smaller they get, the higher they are, the bigger they are. So for my main points, for instance, like this is my main point, you can see that I have heading 1. And then I might have like a sub point. This is heading 2. Now, why is that helpful? Because if you go here to the hamburger symbol, no, not that one. Sorry. Why is that helpful? Because if you go to the hamburger symbol right here, you can see your outline at a glance. So if I'm working on my first point and I want to go to my second point, I can just click. Or if I just want to go to my conclusion, I can just go here. And here's one fun fact that I discovered in a very conventional way that really freaked me out for a moment. You can drag your headings and rearrange your sermon. So for instance, like if I take my third heading, I can drag it and put it on top. And then everything that is included on that heading will also be dragged. Now you
Did
can
you learn
imagine I
that?
found
You learned that the hard way?
I learned that like moments before I was gonna preach. And all my headings were out of place, and I was like, "What just happened?" And then I realized that's what I did. Like I accidentally drag it. So it's just very useful, especially when you need to rearrange thoughts.
Wow.
Like, hey, maybe I want to do that as my first point rather than my second point, and so forth. Is very helpful to me. Another thing, like the cues that you see here, for instance, like illustrations, block, quotes, prompts, you can see them here that I also take advantage of those. Um, and I also use emojis. So, this is something fun that reminds me like, okay, when I need to raise my voice, when I need to be cautious about say something, or I must say something in this
I think I
case.
saw muchas like in all exclamation points a little bit ago. It
Yes.
was like, yeah, you're getting real. Or I saw those emojis with the grimace or the smiley faces, and
With the
yeah,
grimace smile,
yeah,
I sometimes highlight some, but
yeah.
I have a fire emoji that I use when I really want to get passionate about something, like right here. And then there's another one that, I might not have it in this sermon, like, the turtle. It reminds me to slow down as I say something. And the pause symbol reminds me to take a breath
Oh,
before I continue with that. So little here things in there that help me make logos or my sermon a little bit more smooth. Um, but here's the reason why I share that is because I also use logos on my iPad. So when I'm going to preach, I take logos and I take my iPad and I preach from there. And it's just so easy to have everything sync in real time,
yeah.
but also I don't know if a lot of people know this, but the logos preaching feature on the tablet apps, it has a timer in it. And it has saved me so many times since I'm pushing and going over because I look down and it starts flashing like, hey, you only have 2 more minutes left. Uh, and I'm like, well, I'm only on my second point, so let me speed it up. So it's just one of those things that is very, very helpful.
On the timer, can I ask,
Hmm.
is the estimated time at the bottom of this, is that accurate or no?
To me, no.
Okay.
Some
I was just
people, for
curious.
some people, yeah, for some people might be estimate if you read every word.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the way that I write my sermons, you think that this is a manuscript. It's not, because I just have it in bullet points. Like I would say, it's a very detailed outline. So I might read from some things, but I also expand or deviate, and decided to skip things. So,
Yeah.
um, and
Cool.
also, Hispanics, we tend to preach for much, much longer. So these 30 minutes will translate to a 45-minute sermon,
Yeah.
in essence. But it does help as I'm writing, like let's say, okay, my target for the most part is like about 2,500 words or so. So you can see that for this one, I really had a lot to say.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just part of it.
Well, this is great.
Um, yeah.
Anything else, Eddie?
Yeah, so a couple things
Go
as
for it.
a Hispanic, user or someone who speaks Spanish and uses logo. So one of the downsides of preaching a sermon in Spanish, if I have logos as my setup in English,
Mm-hmm.
is this feature right there. Like it only recognizes, like if my logos app is in English, it will only recognize, my Bible reference in English. So if I type Lucas 7:22, it doesn't do anything,
Mm-hmm.
But if I change it to Luke, that's when it recognizes.
Sure.
So that's one of the downsides for that purpose is I found this third-party app in the App Store of Mac that I found it very helpful. That is called the App Language Chooser. I'm going to show it right here on my page.
Okay.
So it's very simple, and basically what it does is changes the language of your application. So what I do, for instance, I'm going to close out my logos in this case, and then I'm going to the app, click File, Open, and then Logos is my most recent one. And it lets me choose the language. So I click Spanish,
Mm-hmm.
and it should come up in Spanish. So everything's Spanish now, even, the
Yeah.
cells and everything that is happening. Now, what do? I just go over here then, and I click my last application close, and everything is right where I left it.
Mm-hmm.
So I can continue working on my sermon. And then in this case now, for instance, if I go with Lucas 16,
Mm-hmm.
now it hyperlinks it. So it's one of those things that it might not be very meaningful, but it does make a big difference when I'm locked in writing my sermon in Spanish. It's really helpful to have that. Another thing, and this is something that might be, it's just something that I discovered recently. I really like these filters that Logo has in your document tab, but I
Mm-hmm.
always wonder why there was one that said languages, and I had 325 resources in English, but only three resources in Spanish. What happened is every time you create a document, if you create it on in the English logos, it will
Mm-hmm.
be tagged as English. And when I
Mm-hmm.
created it in Spanish, it will be tagged as Spanish. Even though my content is in Spanish, if I created that document in my English logos, for
Yes.
lack of a better term, it will tag as English. So just something to keep in mind if you want to utilize that filter, which I many times have been wanting to do,
Yeah.
it will have to be from the beginning when you create
Yeah.
everything. Another thing too, again, I'm a Mac user, so the grammar check that my computer does for my sermon, if I have English logos,
Mm-hmm.
it's not gonna check my grammar in Spanish. So as I'm writing, I need to change my logos to Spanish so that it corrects my grammars. And sometimes, it's not a big deal, but
Yeah.
especially in Spanish, when you have the little accents like right here, it does make a little difference that you want to make sure that you have the right one and everything. So yeah, so that's a little bit of how I use logos as a bilingual. Just
Yeah.
one, final thoughts. I said at the beginning that I really lean in investing into the English library, or I would say that's my first option when I'm thinking about investing in my library. I go to the English side because it has more resources available. Just in general, I mean, resources in the English speaking world, they're a lot more abundant than in the Spanish speaking world. So it's nothing about logos, it's just a reality of things. But there's a couple things that I really invest in my logos that even though I use it, for my research in English, as an Hispanic or someone who speaks Spanish, I need to have this. There are Spanish Bibles, so I go on the Logos and I try to purchase as many Spanish Bibles as I can because those are the ones that I will be using for teaching, preaching, and also doing some like version comparisons. Spanish, Greek, and Hebrew interlinears, I believe that's how you call,
Hmm.
because you need those if you want to use like reverse interlinears. Those reverse a logo has are tied to a specific English version. So you will need to find the ones that are also tied to the Spanish version if you want to do use that feature in Spanish. And also dictionaries. Sometimes I have a lot of great Logo has a lot of great dictionaries in English, but I would invest in a handful of dictionaries in Spanish, both Greek, Hebrew, but also just regular Spanish dictionary, because sometimes you want to find words in the Bible that you want to find a definition within logos, and it's a lot easier when you have those already
Hmm.
built into your software. So that's a few hints. That's how I use logos. That's how I try to take advantage of my
Man.
English side of logos, but also the Spanish side of logos. So I don't know if you have any
Hmm.
questions, Jason, about that.
I don't have questions. I mean, I know when we started, you said I'm a pretty typical user and I don't do anything special, but I feel like you've just like all these interviews, my mind is blown once again. I feel like you're making it your own and you're applying it to your own ministry work, and it's bilingual
Hmm.
ministry work, and that's really impressive. The work that you're doing in order to, navigate through the text in English and in Spanish both. So yeah, I will find the link to the translator app that
Hmm.
you mentioned
Yes.
that's in the Mac store. I know that maybe there's some bilingual Mac users who would really appreciate that. Um, but I think this has been a great interview, a great resource for a lot of people who are looking at translating for different contexts and different congregations. And so this has been really helpful, Eddie. Yeah, I appreciate the time.
And thank you for the time, Jason, for the invitation. I hope it is
Yeah.
helpful to at least one of my fellow bilingual brothers and sisters.
I know that it will be. Yeah, I know that it will be. In fact, I won't. Maybe I can find the link to the interview, but there's a Spanish podcaster who I interviewed at the very beginning of this series, and like I'm sure he's going to benefit from some of this as well because
That's
he's in the
awesome.
Word regularly and also in ministry. So all good. Really appreciate your time, Eddie, and man, your studies, your ministry. I ask blessing on all of it that you're doing right now. So thanks so much for your time, brother. Appreciate it.
Amen. Thank you, Jason. And thank you for everything you do for our Logos fan base and our fellow users. We really appreciate it.
It's fun, man. All right. Well, anybody who's catching this interview, if you found it helpful, please, hit the thumbs up or the subscribe or whatever the YouTubers say. And then if you want to be a guest on the interview YouTube channel, just let me know in the comments or check out logoscoach.com and go and sign up. So thanks, Eddie. Thanks, everybody who's catching these interviews. I really appreciate it.